Hey everyone, so in this video I'm going to demonstrate how to use a chop saw to cut some material, and this is one of the chop saws that we have in our welding shop. And the first thing I want to tell you is that this thing is a beast. It can cut through steel pretty fast, but it's also pretty loud, so make sure you've got some hearing protection. And the stand that it's mounted to is sitting on caster wheels, so you can move it around as you need to in order to cut your material. And right now you can see that it's locked in the down position. So if you were to just try to lift up on the handle, it's not going to open right away. And this is where a lot of students tend to get a little confused. They try to figure out, well, just how do we open it? And actually, it's pretty simple. Let me just go ahead and spin this around so you can see just how. So there's a little locking pin on the right side. So I'm pointing it out right here. And it's on the right side as if we're facing the rear of the chop saw, which we are here. If you were facing the front of the chop saw, it's going to be on the left-hand side. And the locking pin uses tension to hold the chop saw in place. So in order to relieve that tension, that'll allow us to undo the locking pin, we're going to have to push the chop saw a little bit further down. And once we push it down, that's going to alleviate that pressure, and then we can go ahead and pull the locking pin out. Once we do that, we can go ahead and lift the chop saw to the upright position. And then of course, when you're done using the chop saw, you follow the same steps in reverse in order to lock it in the down position. You'd push the chop saw all the way down to its base and then push in the locking pin, and the chop saw is ready to get put back into storage. And every chop saw has a vise assembly, or what some would call a clamp assembly. It allows you to secure material in place so that way it doesn't move around as you're cutting it. It works the same way as a vise. And now this chop saw has an added feature, which is sort of like a quick disconnect. So the quick disconnect has threads on the bottom side, which sit on top of the threaded shaft portion of the vise assembly. And it allows for quick adjustments. So if you were to try to remove your material from the chop saw, you can just loosen it from the material, and then you can go ahead and flip that up, which will allow you to pull back on the vise assembly to open it up much faster. And just the same, if you flip it up, you can push that vise assembly up against your material without having to twist it in all the way, and it saves us valuable time. And so when cutting your material, I don't have anything marked out on this piece of steel, but normally you would. And so all you'd have to do is just line it up with the blade. This will ensure that you have a proper cut. And once it looks like you've got your material lined up with the blade, you can go ahead and play with the vise assembly, clamp your material in place, make sure that everything is still lined up before you cut it. Then once your material is clamped in place, go ahead and just check it one more time, make sure that blade is going to cut just where you want it to. And just before I start cutting, I want you to see that this piece of steel is 3/4 inches thick, so it's a pretty beefy sized piece of carbon steel. Now when you operate the chop saw to cut your material, you should be activating the blade before you come down and make contact with the material. This way you allow the blade to reach its full operating speed before beginning your cut. And we can see just how fast this blade will cut through the material. And I also want you to take note that we have a carbide tip blade on this chop saw right now. We don't have the standard composite cutting disc. And it's always important to remember that while cutting your material, these pieces are going to get hot. So before grabbing your pieces that you've just cut, make sure to have gloves on. That way you don't burn yourself. And here's just another view at the material so that way you can see how thick it is. And this should really drive home how effective a chop saw can be. Now there's another feature that we should go over that this chop saw is able to do. Not all chop saws have this capability. We can make angled cuts with this chop saw. And so you can see as I lift up on this lever, it allows the other portion of the vise assembly to rotate. And so we're able to cut anything at a 90-degree angle, or what would be considered a 0-degree angle as shown on the gauge that I'm about to zoom in on. And so from 0 degrees, we can cut anything up to a 45-degree angle. And so you can see as we look in a little bit closer, the gauge has a couple of tick marks for a 15, a 20, a 30, and a 45-degree angle. And that's pretty much everything you need to know about how to operate a chop saw.